Okay, so I've got a parametric to rectangular question on the board. We're doing a little bit of practice for the parametric test, which is tomorrow. So this is in parametric form where it's got the t's, and I need to put it into rectangular form. To get rectangular form out of this, I need to put get this changed with the one equation subbed into the other. Now, which of these would be easier to solve? I personally think that one would be easier to solve because it doesn't have the squared in it. It'd be a lot easier to solve. And therefore, I'm going to replace, or I'm going to get the t alone. So I'm going to make it x minus 3, and then I'm going to divide by 2 is equal to t. Was this a 5 right here? I thought it was a 3. If you used a 5, you'll have to adjust accordingly. All right, so I'm going to take my t now and put it into the other equation, which is right there and there. So now I have, let's see, y equals t squared, which is x minus 3 over 2 squared. Okay, then I'm going to say plus t, which is right here, x minus 3 over 2. Now, I want to warn you, the directions are going to say to write and simplify an equation. All of you, whether or not you had a problem made for you or not, I need to know if you can handle simplifying something like this, as in multiplying it all the way out. So everyone on your either iPad in front of you or the paper that I gave you for scratch paper, I want you to multiply that all the way out. See if you can handle the algebra. Most kids, when they have difficulty in calculus, struggle with the algebra like this, not the concept, which really wasn't that hard. So let's make sure you get some practice on algebra here. So you're multiplying this thing all the way out. I'll pause while you give that a shot. Okay, common mistake time. What do people think that is? Part I circled. X squared minus 9, right? That's what they think it is. What actually is it? You can't, we've had this in the top 28 million times, and that's because people think when you go like this, you just square both of them. You do not. You multiply it all the way out. So x minus 3 times x minus 3 makes x squared minus 6x plus 9. All right? So this should have been x squared minus 6x plus 9 all over, the 2 has to get squared also, all over 4. Okay? This one is much simpler. It's just over 2. But then it won't be able to be added together because they don't have a common denominator. X squared minus 6x. You're questioning why it's squared? Okay. And then plus 9 all over 4 being added to x minus 3 over 2. Now, I would recommend we change that to have a common denominator, so I'm going to times by 2 on the top and the bottom. Final answer. X squared plus 2x minus 6x makes x squared minus 4x. And then I have a positive 9 and a negative 6, and that makes positive 3 all over 4. Raise your hand if you were able to handle that. Okay, good. All right. That is writing and simplifying an equation. That was a rectangular equation now. What did it say in parentheses after it? Find the domain of it. Oh, after all that, you have more work? Yes. The domain is just, if t was 0, what point would I have? And then of that point, which part gives me the domain? So if I'm going to put in a 0 into this and this, I would have y equals 0 and x equals 3, 3 comma 0. I'm going to now put this point in and see what it would give me. At time 2, I'd have 3 times 2 is 4, plus 3 is 7, and then 2 squared is 4, plus 2 is 6, 7 comma 6. There. There's my two rectangular points that it goes from here to here. But how did I get that? I put in t as 0, and I found out what point I got. I put in t as 2, and I found out the other point that I had. Okay, and that would have worked in either equation, up here or down in my parametric equations. Either one of them could have given me the 2 points by sticking in time. Well, wait a minute. The top one wouldn't have worked because time is 0. There's nowhere to put that in that top equation. I'm wrong. Just this equation. So I put in my times. I found out my points. And then these 2 points tell me the domain. But hopefully you know domain is involved with x's. Those two tell me my domain. My domain is from 3 to 7. Another kid last hour showed a really elegant way to solve this. I liked it a lot. He said, you can solve this t in terms of x. Remember how we did that already and we figured out that it was x minus 3 over 2? If t is x minus 3 over 2, you can put it right there and then solve it. And you could figure out what it's between in terms of x. That works awesome. But it's a little more complicated, so I think I'm going to just say I can find the 2 points that it goes from this to this at time 0 and time 2, and then that tells me, okay, it goes from 3 to 7. All right. Now, next kind is graph parametric points by hand. So their question should have been, and by the way, these are each 1 point as we're grading their homework. Graph parametric points by hand. They should have given you a parametric equation. And then they should have asked you to make a TXY chart for that. How many of you are looking at a paper where they did give you a parametric and a T chart? Only 2 people did this right in the whole room? Okay. So if they didn't give you a parametric, then I'm going to. So everybody use this one if they didn't already give you a parametric equation. And I want you to find a few points by hand on this. Let's say I have x equals 3t plus 1 and y equals t squared minus 7t. I'd like you to find me a few points, 0x and y, sorry, txy. And I was just thinking ahead to what I was going to ask you to find. Find me 0, 1, and 2. I'll just find 3 points on that. I'll pause for a second while you give that a try. If your person didn't already have one, there's one you should try. Okay. So here's some points. If I stick in 0 as time, then I'm going to get 2 things, an x and a y. If I put in 0 here, I get x is 1. If I put in 0 here, I get y is 0. Did you get 1, 0? Good. If I put in 1 on this equation and a 1 on this equation, I get 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4. And 1 minus 7 makes negative 6. 4 comma negative 6. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Okay, good. And the next one is if I put in a 2, I would have 3 times 2 is 6 plus 1 is 7. And then I stick a 2 in to this equation, and I'd have 2 squared is 4 minus 7 times 2 is 14. 4 minus 14, I think negative 10. Is that right? All right, good. Okay, any questions about finding points for a parametric equation? All right. The hardest kind like this, the state of the art, would be if I gave you parametrics that have trig in them. And then the t's aren't time anymore. What are the t's? Angles. So if I ask you to find sine of 30 or sine of 90 or sine of pi over 2, which is the same thing as 90, you should be able to do those. All the easy ones. And besides, you'll have a calculator, so if you had to, you can type in sine 90. Just make sure you know what mode you're in your calculator. you're using parametric, so if you're doing, if you want to be in radian mode, just use radians. It'll be fine. Okay, so that's almost the last one. The very last one is, or part of the last one here, is to do those same points except with a calculator. So I'm going to give you one that's trig, and this time I don't care what problem they made. See if they gave you a problem so that you can grade it. The fourth one, did they give you a problem to do where you're supposed to use a calculator for it? Okay, if they gave you a problem that could be calculator could do it, that's fine. I'm going to give you a more complicated one. I want all of you to try it. X equals cosine of t. Y equals sine of t. I want you to find me 3 points. T is not time anymore. T is angles. We're going to go from 0 to pi over 2 to pi. Find me those 3 things. You're going to have to figure out cosine of 0, sine of 0, sine of pi over 2, cosine of pi over 2, cosine of pi, sine of pi. You probably should be drawing little triangles. Find me 3 points. I'll pause for a second while you try that. All right, to get you started here, if I put in 0, a lot of people get stuck on this 0 degrees. So what does that even mean? Or 0 radians? That's like an angle that starts right here. Normally they open up like this, but it never opened. It's an angle of 0 degrees. It's just out there. The point out there is handy then. It's 1, 0. And that tells me the cosine and the sine of it. Because sine's the y, cosine's the x. So sine's the y of it, which would be 0. And that's for the y here. And cosine of it is the x, which is 1. Did you get 1, 0? Raise your hand if you did. Okay. Then I'm going to put in pi over 2. For that, I'd like to go to this spot, because that's where pi over 2 is. And that's at 0, 1. And this time, to find my x, I'm going to do this one. Cosine of that spot, which is 0. And to get the y, I do the sine of that spot. Sine's the y, and that means it's 1. 0, 1. Raise your hand if you had that one right. Okay, good. If you actually had to graph these things, we're giving a direction too? You'd start at this point, and you'd go to this point, and I bet you it ends up looking kind of like a circle, and it has direction. Put a little arrow on it like that, and you should, if you actually were to graph it. I didn't say you needed to actually graph these, although it does say graph them with a calculator. All right, so just to be sure you actually know how to do this, everybody grab a graphing calculator right now, and I'd like you to graph this little system, and hopefully we better limit it. I'm going to pause for a second while I get the calculators out. Okay, so on this one, I need to set my window now. My window I said we were going to do is between 0 and pi. So here's 0 to pi, and I'm going to clear this and then put in pi, which is right there. And then I'm going to hit enter. Steps, 2's are big steps. These are usually more like 0.1, so I'm going to use 0.1 for a step. And then when I hit graph, cool, looks like a sort of a circle, and then it stopped. Did it have a direction to it? Yeah. Yes, so you should, if you were to graph this, put a little arrow on this thing to say it's going that way. Any questions? Is there anybody that wasn't able to make it work because the calculator's messed up? Because I can probably fix it. But are you doing one from a kid? Or are you putting in my sine and cosine? Okay, yeah. If your kid made you one and you're doing that, that's awesome. I'm happy that. But mine's trig. If yours is trig, right? You're doing a trig one? Okay, so then you're good. If you were just doing an easy one from a kid, I would strongly recommend doing this trig one. Okay. Why did it stop halfway in making its circle? Because we only wanted to do it between 0 and pi. Okay. And when we connect the dots with a whole bunch of little steps in between, the little 0.1 steps, it ends up going from 1 comma 0 to 0 comma 1, which we already had these 2 points here, you know. And then at pi, it would be negative 1 comma 0. That's that spot right there. And it makes some sense that you just keep moving from here was the first point at t equals 0. Here was t equals 1. Or no, it was t equals pi over 2 actually. And then as we keep getting bigger, it makes some sense. All right. So last thought is, how do you make a straight line? Now we're going to go back to, hopefully your kid made you a problem like this. They were supposed to transform 2 points, unfortunately spelling error, 2TWO, 2 points into a parametric line. So hopefully they gave you 2 points. If they did not, here is 2 points, 2 comma 5 and negative 8 comma 12. And try to change those 2 points. It's called a directed line segment, as in it's got a direction. Most line segments are just like, oh, from here to here. That's it. But this one has a direction, either left to right or right to left, or just put a little arrow on it when you're done. So try to make your equation for this. Parametrics. Okay, your suffering is over. Here's the answer. X starts at a 2 and then goes down to get to this point. It has to go down quite a bit to get to negative 8. That's down 10 many times by t. Y is equal to starting value of 5, and that's right here. And then it goes to 12, which is up 7 t. Starting value. X's starting value is 2. Y's starting value was 5. I don't want to try to re-summarize that. That's how you do it. This is the change. That's the change. I'm happy if you're summarizing it, but I'm not going to use your words. Yes? What? The limits for t. Okay, the limits for t. Good question. Do I have to have limits for t? If it doesn't say that you have to give a domain, then you wouldn't have to. Would you know how to? If it said to? What's the domain of this thing? Domain is that x's or y's? That's the x's. Okay. X would be from 2 to negative 8. That's in the rectangular format. What would time be? What would t? Say it. 0 to 1. How do I know that the domain on this thing's from 0 to 1? Exactly. If you plug in the 0 into this little set of equations, you'll get 2 comma 5. Guess what you get when you put in a 1? Negative 8 comma 12. Yep. And I can tell you that if you use this method that I've taught you of starting value and then the change times the t, that it will be between 0 and 1. And if you want to check and see if you did it right, your suggestion of take the 0 and stick it in and see what you get, if you do it right, when you stick in 0, you will get 2 comma 5. And if you stick in 1 into your equations, you will get the other point, negative 8 comma 12. Okay. That covers most of the things that you'd have to be able to do. And the next part is you were just actually grading a paper during that time, so hopefully by now you have graded 5 questions. They should have given you 5 questions and answers. If just an answer was wrong, take off half. If there was a question missing, take off a full point. And then you're going to give them a score out of 5. So give them the score out of 5 put a little CB in your name, and then head back to your own desk. Okay, so this is the part where I've covered most of the things that I think you need for this upcoming test, and you have one last night to study. The test is tomorrow. Okay, can you guys not talk right now? All right, so in a moment, I'm going to turn you loose to just work to get ready for that test. And your only other thing, I do need to get homework scores here in, and you got to keep doing your homework. If you're not getting your homework done, it's very frustrating. I know there's some people that couldn't do it last night because you were absent because you were taking an AP test. Do also remember that there's videos that I post that can get all that and keep you totally up to date. But in the meantime, I'm just hoping that I feel like you're understanding this, and I think you're going to do fine. But if you have last thoughts on getting prepared, you can come in the morning. I am available on Wednesday mornings during mass time, not before mass time, but during mass time. Yes? Calculators are allowed on the test, yes. Okay. I want to caution you to make sure you show your work thoroughly, because some people think, oh, I could just get it from my calculator and write no work and just an answer. I will not give credit for that. You have to show me how you got it. Okay? All right. That's all I have for you for the review for the parametric test coming tomorrow.